The tribunal convened within 48 hours. On a station orbiting Ariadu Prime, a polished chamber of transparasteel and black durasteel became the center of a growing galactic storm. The Empire had labeled it a standard inquiry. No one believed that. Every surface gleamed with the pressure of scrutiny. Every silence felt weaponized. Elira Voss sat straight-backed at one end of the hearing table, her uniform crisp, her composure unshakable. She neither masked the fading mark on her cheek nor drew attention to it. It was a statement without words. Across from her stood Exortal, shackled not with restraints, but with expectation. The Empire, for all its rigid protocols, knew better than to publicly humiliate a Chlorian. The species' cultural memory ran deep, and their sense of honor deeper still. Stripping that from him would only provoke the kind of unity the Empire feared most, a rallying of alien worlds against a common symbol of human supremacy. High Tribunal Judge Marin Sol, an elder of weathered poise and platinum regalia, addressed the room with her thin, measured voice. Commander Voss, Commander Exortal, what transpired aboard the Iron Eclipse is, by law, an infraction against military discipline. However, it has now extended beyond the command deck into the sphere of public consequence. On the screens behind her, frozen footage of the incident hovered like a ghost. Exortal's clawed hand mid-strike, Elira's head beginning to turn, the stunned silence of the crew around them. It had gone viral within hours, fractured across interpretations. In the Senate, political factions had seized on it with alarming speed. Human-centric loyalists called it a declaration of rebellion. Alien rights delegates called it a desperate act of misunderstood tradition. Others, quieter and more dangerous, saw it as a spark. I am not here to defend a slap, Elira said calmly. But context must precede judgment. Exortal's action, while outside regulation, was not an act of malice. He warned me in his own way. I failed to interpret it. There was a stir among the observers. Admiral Kale Pharos, seated beside Sol, leaned forward. You're admitting failure, Commander? I'm acknowledging cultural blindness, she answered, eyes unwavering. Which, frankly, is endemic to our command structure. Exortal's deep voice broke in. Among the Chlorian Guard, when a subordinate disobeys to protect, they face judgment. But when a superior fails to understand intent, they are expected to listen, not punish. And yet you struck her, Pharos replied, voice sharpened with distaste. I completed a ritual, a rite of confrontation. It is a vow of equal standing, not an attack, a request to be seen. He stood tall, his voice resonating across the chamber. I did not strike a superior officer. I marked an equal. The room grew still again. That distinction, so simple, yet explosive, hung in the air. Outside, the galaxy was fracturing. Protests erupted on the alloyed streets of Nova Centra, where human citizens clashed with Chlorian migrants. Military divisions with alien personnel were reporting tension. Some units refused to operate together until the hearing's outcome was known. What had begun as a singular event had metastasized into a test of the Empire's fragile inclusivity. Meanwhile, Elira's position became precarious. Some accused her of weakness for not retaliating. Others hailed her restraint as a sign of evolved leadership. She had become the symbol of two conflicting ideals, the cold precision of imperial order and the emerging necessity for cultural understanding. Neither identity fit comfortably, and yet she wore both like armor. Behind closed doors, factions whispered about her future. Her career, long predicted to ascend into admiralty, now teetered. Loyalty to her species or loyalty to the Empire, one would have to be chosen. The tribunal recessed without verdict. It had become clear that this hearing was not meant to judge a moment, but to buy time for political machinery to decide what that moment would mean. In the hours that followed, Elira returned to her temporary quarters aboard the station. They were sterile, too brightly lit, designed to discourage personal comfort. Yet she found herself sitting in silence, turning over Exortal's words. She remembered his posture after the strike, rigid, not triumphant. The glint in his eyes had not been defiance, but mourning. She had missed it then. But now, in hindsight, she understood. It hadn't been a gesture of power. It had been a plea. Her door chimed. Exortal entered without ceremony. Two guards flanked the hallway outside, but neither seemed willing to interrupt. He stood at attention, then inclined his head, a gesture of both respect and fatigue. I am told the tribunal may take days, he said. Or weeks, Elira replied. They're hoping the public will forget. They won't, he said simply. A pause stretched between them. The silence no longer bristled with hostility. You should have told me, she said finally. I assumed you knew. I thought an officer of your rank would have studied Chlorian customs. Elira allowed a bitter smile. I studied a syllabus approved by a human-led committee that considered cultural history an elective. Exortal grunted. That is your empire's failure, not mine. She looked at him for a long moment. Why didn't you fight back when I had you detained? I did fight, but not with fists. With truth. There was no arrogance in his words, just certainty. Elira stood. Her cheek had faded from bruised violet to faint shadow. You know they'll try to use this. To pit us against each other. Make me the hero. You the threat. Yes, he said. And if we allow it, they win. So what do we do? Exortal's eyes flicked toward the stars beyond the viewport. We speak. Not to the tribunal, but to the people. Together. That's mutiny. That's leadership. She studied him, searching for deception, for anything that might confirm the fears others had voiced. But all she saw was conviction. She stepped forward. Then we write the address. Tonight. He nodded once. That night, while the Empire deliberated its response, while commentators speculated endlessly on motive and fallout, a single encrypted broadcast leaked onto a dozen fringe networks. It was not officially sanctioned. It was not authorized. But it spread with the kind of viral velocity that no authority could contain. Elira Voss and Exortal sat side by side, not in uniform, but in plain garments. The backdrop was unadorned metal. No symbols, no flags, just two officers, two soldiers, two beings bound by something more than allegiance. Elira spoke first. What happened aboard the Iron Eclipse has been distorted, politicized, and weaponized. This is our account, unfiltered. Exortal followed. I struck a fellow officer, not to dominate her, but to be heard by her. My people speak with gesture as well as words. I did not know that what I meant as unity would be taken as rebellion. Elira leaned forward slightly. This isn't just about a slap. It's about how we fail to listen, how we train officers to obey, but not to understand. Their message was brief, direct, and it ignited a movement the tribunal could neither silence nor predict. By morning, protest chants had changed from accusations to questions. What does the slap mean? They asked. Not who is guilty. It was a shift. Subtle, but seismic. The tribunal did not reconvene the next day. And for the first time in her career, Elira wasn't sure if the verdict even mattered anymore. The verdict arrived in silence. No announcement. No press conference. Just a terse transmission, signed by High Tribunal Judge Sol and encoded with Imperial Authority Seal 9. It reached Commander Elira Voss while she was mid-briefing with her executive officer. She read the message twice. Then once more. Her face didn't change. Continue without me, she said, rising from the holotable. The ruling, no punitive action to be taken. No exoneration to be granted. An elegant evasion. The tribunal had chosen ambiguity, neither condemnation nor forgiveness. They buried the moment in legal gray, hoping history would forget it ever flared. But history had no intention of forgetting. The message was already obsolete. Across 100 systems, the aftermath of the strike had unraveled command chains and rewired alliances. Soldiers whispered about the vow of equivalence. Young officers adopted the red diagonal across their shoulders, a silent symbol of unity across rank, race, and species. Some hailed it as a peaceful protest. Others called it treason. The Empire scrambled to restore order. Elira stood in the observatory deck of the Iron Eclipse, the ship now stationed at the edge of the Ellerin Expanse, a border rife with instability. Her ship was no longer just a battleship. It was an icon, one the Central Fleet no longer trusted, and one the outer sectors couldn't stop watching. Exortal approached quietly, his movement unervingly silent for someone of his size. He had returned to armor, though his insignia had subtly changed. No longer purely Chlorian script, now hybridized, bearing both imperial glyphs and a symbol from Elira's home sector. They hoped ambiguity would douse the flame, he said, standing beside her. It never works, she replied. They know that too, but they fear what comes next even more. She nodded. Then they should fear it, because I'm not going back to how things were. He turned toward her. Nor I. The ship's engines hummed below. Navigation sensors lit the screen before them, plotting distant orbital paths and recent disturbances. The Elleran reaches were fracturing. Pirate factions rose up. Border planets declared autonomy. The Empire's presence stretched thin, even as its voice grew louder. Command has reassigned us, Illyra said after a beat. They want us patrolling Illyra Prime. A powder keg, with no fuse left to burn. They shared a look. The assignment was not just strategy. It was punishment dressed as duty. The Empire didn't want martyrs, but they wanted symbols exiled from Central Sight. Illyra Prime had broken from Imperial tax compliance months ago. Its leadership hosted alien dignitaries. And worst of all, its defense fleet was made of humans and non-humans operating without sectoral segregation. The Iron Eclipse was being sent to enforce control, or to fail conspicuously trying. Orders? Exortal asked. Illyra turned fully toward him. I plan to carry out the mission, but not the way they expect. She called an emergency session of her senior staff. Gathered around the bridge's command tier, 10 officers, human, Twi'lek, Chlorian, Duro, even a rare Zentari, listened as she outlined a course of action no manual endorsed. We engage Illyra not with force, she said, but with recognition. We speak to their councils. We negotiate in the open. We don't threaten, we protect. Because our power doesn't lie in the strength of our weapons anymore. It lies in the message we carry. Lieutenant Harvin, a seasoned tactical advisor, frowned. Ma'am, that's political rhetoric. They'll call it weakness. Let them, she said. It's the strongest position we've ever had. We show them that an Imperial vessel can carry peace as effectively as war. Exortal's voice cut in, low and calm. And if they attack? Illyra met his gaze. Then we fight. But on our terms. The room fell quiet. Then slowly, one by one, heads nodded. When the Iron Eclipse arrived in Illyra's orbit, they expected resistance. What they found instead was anticipation. Dozens of freighters, skiffs, and repurposed corvettes floated in loose formation, neither armed nor retreating. Their signals flooded the comms with greetings, not warnings. A representative came aboard. A young, three-eyed humanoid named Lessa Creel. She stood on the Eclipse's bridge, not with fear, but with the confident bearing of someone who had watched every second of Illyra and Exortal's broadcast a dozen times. You changed the conversation, she said, without preamble. Now finish it. We're not here to conquer, Illyra replied. We're here to understand what's worth saving. Negotiations began in earnest. The Elleran leadership, a multi-species coalition of former imperial governors, merchant queens, and syndicate defectors, demanded fair trade routes, military autonomy, and legal recognition of alien cultural practices within sector governance. For the first time in her career, Illyra operated without a script. It was diplomacy at the edge of a knife. She found herself learning again, listening, adapting. Days passed, then weeks. The Empire sent coded demands for progress. She replied with curated updates, truthful, but filtered. Just enough to avoid reprisal. Just enough to keep command from sending someone less diplomatic. And through it all, Exortal remained at her side. Sometimes advisor, sometimes translator, always present. They sparred in the training bays, exchanged fragments of cultural stories, shared meals in the quiet hours when command tensions waned. Slowly, without effort or intention, they ceased to be symbols and returned to being people. One evening, under artificial starlight, she asked, "Do you ever regret joining the Empire?" He considered that for a long time. No, but I regret thinking it could change without being challenged. Illyra sighed. We're not going to be promoted after this. No, he agreed. But we may be remembered. That night, a coded message slipped through Illyra's private terminal. High Command. No encryption. Command Voss is hereby relieved of primary duties pending reassignment. A replacement fleet is en route to Illyra. You are ordered to return to Ariadu Station for debrief and evaluation. It was the end she had foreseen from the beginning. She called Exortal to her quarters. Showed him the message. They're going to try to bury it, she said. Then we don't let them. What do we do? He didn't hesitate. We leave. Desertion? No, he said, voice even. Redirection. She stared at him, stunned. You're suggesting we defect? I'm suggesting we continue the mission. Without the chains. The Iron Eclipse was theirs. The crew, for the most part, loyal not to the Empire, but to the ideals it had claimed to represent. Alira reached out, typed a single command into the console, and encrypted the coordinates they'd discussed in half-whispers weeks ago. Refugees were gathering in the Edge systems. Pirates were becoming protectors. A new network of ships, codes, and voices was emerging. A fleet without a flag. Alira looked at Exortal. For the first time, there were no ranks between them. No barriers. Just a choice. Then let's go, she said. As the Iron Eclipse veered away from Imperial space, it left behind more than an assignment. It left behind the illusion that the Empire was inevitable, that peace could only be kept by power. They weren't rebels. Not yet. They were something older, something more dangerous. Believers. And the galaxy, already trembling, began to listen.